Well, I know you had a stat for me that about 60% to 80% of Verticomm's clients are implementing AI.
I think really where I would draw concern really from any of this is that like latter 20%, right? If we're saying that broadly 80% of companies are sort of voluntarily or involuntarily exposed to it, it is the 20% that are doing nothing and that they're not exposed to it, which they could be in real trouble.
Will, welcome back to Voices of Verticomm episode 2.
Yes, thank you. Excited to be back.
Me as well. So this is kind of a part 2 of the first conversation that we had last week, where we talked about AI, all things AI, where it stands and where it's going to go in the future.
Yep.
So today we're going to talk a little bit more about that second half of where it's going to go in the future. Just kind of a quick recap of last episode. You went into a couple points about how AI isn't really as close as we might think to completing an entire human because they're still very hyper-specific in the tasks that they perform. And I guess the other thing that we talked about a bit was there's a growing gap between AI leaders and the average business. I think you referred to that as the rubber band effect.
Yeah. Yep.
And maybe another thing, just companies that aren't thinking about adopting AI now, they're risking by the day being edged out by their competitors who are using AI.
Yep.
So maybe we could start a little bit more with the rubber band theory, because we touched on it a little bit, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I don't actually know if like how broadly this theory is recognized, but it's certainly when I look at technology, and I'm not even just AI, but technology in general, and how it sort of affects industries that are adjacent to it. This is just a wonderful example of kind of what we're going to continue to see as AI is made more prevalent through the world. And I'll even take a step way back, and let's talk about like semiconductors, right? Or even just computers in general. And if we put all of humanity, and I know this is weird, but bear with me, but if we put all of humanity on a grid, and the idea of how this grid is organized is that verticals or industries that connect to one another are sort of adjacent to one another. That's what it starts out as. And so like if we go back to the Stone Age, the grid is flat, right? But the more advanced each one of those verticals get, if you can sort of imagine this grid that we create in front of us, the more advanced that one gets, it rises up, right? There's a little bar that will rise in that spot on the grid. And so if through one of these verticals they develop a new technology and it makes it so that you can produce more, or you can produce it faster, or you can do it for less, then it's more advanced. And any of the industries that are sort of, in this metaphor that we're creating, any industry that's near that will be pulled up because of the advancements that are made in a singular field. But it takes time, right? You don't just inherently, because you've created a faster way to process grain, that does mean that you have a way to feed more people. It means that you can take care of livestock better. You can do, things in other industries are affected by it, but it just takes time for those effects to spread out. And what we have seen with computers is that computers are incredibly capable. And we are familiar with how quickly the computational power of these systems grows through something that's called Moore's Law, or that's, historically we've used that. How accurate Moore's Law has been over time is not part of the discussion that we're going to talk about today, but the idea is that the computational power doubles every X number of years. And I don't remember the exact number, but that's the theory. And so that held true for a long time. And I don't know if it's true now, but it certainly for a period of time was true that we were actually beating Moore's Law, and that computers were getting more, they were more than doubling in power over whatever the period of time was. And so what ended up happening is that all of these sort of industries started to pop up around this computational power that was being created, but it takes time for all of those to catch up. And the medical field, even though it's not directly adjacent to semiconductors and it's not directly adjacent to, in this very specific case, processors, we still saw advances come into the medical field through the advancement in how quickly we could process data, like modeling of genomes and these other like computationally expensive things. But it just takes time to do that. And same with everything else. Like people could design houses using CAD systems, and they could, build massive delivery systems like what Amazon is doing. And so all these things, like the technology has existed for a while, but it takes time to refine it and sort of mold it after the raw technology itself exists. And so the idea here is that after you have the raw technology, that sort of pulls the industries up by their britches or by their rubber bands, to then get them caught up with all this technology. And the reality of it is that it's very, very slow at the start. It's super hard, because what you're doing is you're designing the custom system to leverage the technology for your industry to make it useful in that context. But as soon as that technology starts to show up, like as soon as we've sort of figured out the connecting points between this technology that has come out, AI in this case, and the industry and where it's useful, there's going to be a few number of actors that are used. They're the ones that made it, right? And we'll start to see them accelerate in business, and everybody else is now going to rush to keep up to them. And thus, what happens is that you get this logarithmic, or it's an exponential, whichever way the graph goes. You get this thing where it's very slow to start, but as soon as it starts and that technology is out there and the world sort of starts to recognize how this helps, it snaps up that technology at an incredible pace. And just with how AI is working in this field, AI is proven today to be very powerful, and it's proven to solve challenges that are very real. But we don't exactly know how to apply it everywhere yet. And as time goes on, we're going to continue to see that, just because it falls in the realm of technology and we've already seen it, where it starts to lift up all these other industries and make them, they're going to be forced to keep up. And it kind of falls, I think, into the third point, and I'll pause here for a second, of like, if you're not trying to catch up, if you're not trying to play, understand that there's going to be a rubber band effect, you'll be left behind.
Yep. It makes sense. It makes me wonder where we are in that, if we're halfway up the rubber band snapping or if it's still being stretched out. Because to me, it feels like it is sort of very, very slowly, and then everything all at once. It feels like that could be possible soon with AI in general. Well, I know you had a stat for me that about 60% to 80% of Verticomm's clients are implementing AI in their processes somehow.
Yeah.
Maybe that could be a sort of point that people are catching up. So we are kind of maybe further along. Maybe. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and that I'll actually touch on that stat just a little bit. And the idea behind that stat is that 60 to 80% of our clients are leveraging systems with AI in it, whether or not they know it. So it's, the where this comes from is that we look at our client base. What's our client base using? What are the licenses that they have? And some of them have come to us and said that we explicitly want this feature out of a license, like Microsoft Copilot, for example. Or some of them have Microsoft Copilot, whether or not they know that they have that. We also can make some sort of interpretations based off of the systems that we're monitoring and what pieces of software they're using. And so I'm sure that some of the clients know about it and some of the clients are leveraging it every single day, but there's some that have the tools that are being built in by the vendors, and maybe the vendor's not communicating it well. Maybe the client doesn't know about it for who knows what reason, or maybe they're avoiding it. But yeah, it is everywhere is really what that stat is trying to get at.
Maybe that's still a point of optimism then, if it's as ubiquitous as you're saying that it is. And maybe we shouldn't be fearing a moment in a year or two where all of a sudden every job is at risk or something like that.
Yeah, that's fair, and I agree. Like I definitely don't think it's going to be every job, but I think really where I would draw concern really from any of this is that like latter 20%, right? If we're saying that broadly 80% of companies are sort of voluntarily or involuntarily exposed to it, it is the 20% that are doing nothing and that they're not exposed to it, which they could be in real trouble. And it could come from a lot of places. Like I don't want to. I actually think it's not really useful to say that it's going to come from a particular area because your guess is as good as mine. But yeah, broadly, it is. It absolutely should not be ignored, and people should be being aware of where is it in our systems and how is it going to affect us. Are vendors implementing it, and how are we paying attention to what they're doing? That kind of stuff.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So I want to hear a little bit about LLMs versus agent orchestration. I think we talked about it a little bit last episode. And what's the difference and why does it matter for businesses?
Yeah, and this is it's I actually will have a whole talk on this. And we have actually, since I've got you two in here, we should set up the podcast for that, or a webinar for this dedicated topic. So I'm going to kind of give this at surface level. Almost like the vast majority of people I talk to know what an LLM is, and even if they don't, and that stands for large language model. And even if people don't know what an LLM is, they have almost always played with it, right? ChatGPT is an LLM. Claude Code, Gemini, all these systems, they're technically they're GPTs, but just for the sake of simplicity, they're this sort of style of conversational AI that we have today. And very much in the sense that you can like ask it a question in human language and it can respond in human language. And I'm not going to really make any comments on how accurate they are. They're getting better every day. They're training it on how to be correct, but they are a statistical model that can really only respond, right? It's just like LLMs in a nutshell. That's their core function. And that's actually what was made available to us through sort of like the earliest version of ChatGPT in 2022 was this conversational AI. That was a long time ago at this point, right? I mean, 4 years ago or something like that. And I'm not going to touch on all of the changes that have occurred since 2022 and now, but basically the biggest sort of in a nutshell change that has occurred is these major industry players have given LLMs the ability to use tools. And this can mean like in ChatGPT, you can now ask it to generate an image, or in Copilot, you can ask it to search your environment. The core LLM, the core model, hasn't changed, right? It's still a conversational agent at heart. It's still a statistical model at heart in terms of how it's coming up with an answer, a non-deterministic system. But they've plugged in these things for it to do. But a huge gap for a very long time has been their ability to take actions. And there's good reasons for this. I mean, you don't really want a system that's being tested to take actions on your stuff. But like when they're using tools, for the most part, like even Copilot and ChatGPT, like it can search the web. But if you were to ask it, like, I want you to go make me a website, that the LLM in and of itself is not able to do that without some really special things to having been set up. And nowadays we have that. We have systems that are using LLMs, but they're layering them on top of tools and they're layering them on top of frameworks to build things like what many people are talking about, which is like Claude Code or Codex, or I think Google's is called Anti-Gravity. And they all sort of have their own flavor of this. But the main difference between just like a raw LLM and a conversational AI that we can go back and forth with is that these agentic systems have the ability to take actions and to create more than just like what their tools allow them to create. I'll without going down the tangent any further, it allows us to create these hugely advanced systems and ask these incredibly complex requests of a system. And the LLM sort of works in concert with your computer systems and its tools to take time to reason and think through how to create something. And they're really able to do more than just like handle the conversational part. They're actually able to automate whole tasks or navigate whole scenarios sort of on their own. And that is, we basically can't ignore that's where the future is going to go in some regard.
Would this be an example of what you were saying earlier about in the early ages of a new technology, you have that raw technology, and then there's that time between that and then when everyone starts to adopt it. Would you say that agents are that final form of that, where it's that technology that it's like, everyone's starting to use it and it's like really become industrialized, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, what the final form will be is
Mm-hmm.
is
It
your
could,
guess is
it
as good
could
as
be
mine.
the very beginning of something even bigger in 10 years too,
Right.
and it probably will be.
Right, exactly. So final form, who knows? But in terms of the rubber band effect, absolutely. And we're dealing with this in Verticomm right now. So in 2025, the beginning of 2025, we actually hired a DevOps team. It's a small team. It's not huge. It's like 3 individuals that we have working on it. But we went through this whole process of using automation, using it's an orchestration platform that we use, and the idea is that we would take specific tasks and then we would automate them. And then where it would make sense to plug in the LLM, we would build this chain of very static conditions and then plug the LLM into this very specific part of it, like go read this email and make a determination, and then it would go right back into the automation chain, knowing that we used that to interact with the systems. With this new model that's coming out, these agentic systems, we're finding that not only do we not have to handle the conversational part, which is what the LLM solved in automation, we can also just ask the system to go automate this. It'll go write a program to go do all of that manual flow work that we've done, and it is astonishing what we can do. We can get into examples later if you want to talk about them. But it's a totally different workflow, and it's truly very likely where we're going to go, and it could benefit not only the DevOps team. Like, I could see this benefiting every single staff member. You could then ask conversationally any question. We use like eAuto is a really great example for the print copier industry. You could ask a question of the system, and rather than having to like know how to navigate eAuto and know how to create orders and manage opportunities and contracts and all these things, you can just ask a plain English question of it, and it can go interact with the system for you. And if you say, hey, I would like to have a report on this client every single week, it can just go do that. You don't have to have any technical understanding in the middle. But what's happening, what the challenge here is very much around how do we get this system that has really what benefits from a huge amount of access and a huge amount of control in kind of a scary way. How do we manage that across our user base? How do we give them access? How do we limit their access? How do we make it so that if they want to create their own things, like maybe they do want to host their own reports, how do we do that in a safe and secure way? And that's what we're working on right now, but it will take time. It is taking time to figure out what like the right way to do it is. So
And it takes more humans to answer these questions.
Right. Exactly.
So, yeah, point of optimism there, I guess.
Yeah. So anyways, it'll be, yes, we're going to see the effect. I think as soon as we figure out how to present it to like a singular group, and once we've kind of solved the architectural question of how do we safely, smartly deploy agentic systems internal to one department, once we get that done, we should be able to copy and paste it across the rest of it. And it should, I imagine, sort of rubber band effect internal to just all copy and Verticomm, how we use AI.
Well, speaking of Verticomm, I want to tie all of this sort of more into what we do with Verticomm and what you do with Verticomm. I'd love to know, maybe Verticomm has some stories, some wins in terms of our deploying of AI with our clients, and maybe some wisdom we can share with our listeners about us as an IT leader and maybe what we have helped our clients with as far as AI.
Yeah. So what it is that Verticomm is doing for customers right now is we're working internally on sort of the, not, I wouldn't say the bleeding edge, because we're not OpenAI, we're not Google, we're not these huge corporations, but sort of like the bleeding edge of where we can comfortably be, I guess is the way to do it. There's a term for this. I don't remember what it is, but we're trying to make intelligent moves to what's next. And we are investing the time to explore these internally before we're presenting them to our customers, because what we want to present to our clients is really like a matured solution. And it doesn't need to be 100%. Like, we don't need it to solve everything, but we need to see that it's valuable to our customers, and we want to be able to help them see that it's valuable for themselves as well. So we're sort of taking all of the noise from, ranging from AI is going to take over the world and it's going to destroy the economy and it's, all these things. And we're sort of distilling it down into the most impactful things that we think matter to businesses, right? Like, what is it that they should be doing today? What can they do today? And so number one is just consulting them on what is noise, what do they need to pay attention to, what do they probably not need to pay attention to, or not that they don't need to pay attention to it, but like what's immediately impactful to them versus what is like a societal challenge that they're not going to solve on their own. So that's number one. Number two is, of all of these sort of things that you need to pay attention to, what can they do right now? What is something that, maybe they want to leverage AI across their entire organization, or maybe they just, as a business owner or a business leader, they want to explore it on their own, maybe in like a safe bubble so that they can start to build that value idea on their own. We help them navigate that, ranging from, we have licenses that we can build, we have automation and orchestration that we can build for them, and sort of help them in on that journey. Just as an example, one of the things that we're seeing very frequently now, and I think this is appropriate for most businesses to be exploring, is Copilot, or like, I want to have a conversational AI deployed in our business. How do I do that? And so it's a perfect question to be asking is how do I do it? Because not only is it just technically kind of a weird question of how should you do it, there's also security concerns and risks of data exposure, and how do you handle doing this in a safe way. So we had a client here recently who uses Claude and Copilot and Gemini, and they were very familiar with using LLMs. And they asked us to come in and do what we offer as a AI readiness assessment. And what we do in this assessment is we look over their environment and we look over their policies and say, how ready are they to go? And we actually found a really big gap for them, which was that they work with clients that have sensitive data. And so before they can process that sensitive data in an AI system, they need to manage that with their NDAs, because you're effectively sending this data off to another entity. And if that's not handled appropriately in your contracts, then you could be potentially violating this NDA. So there's a whole process there that we help them through. It's like, how do you write your own internal policies so that your staff are using a system that can secure the data appropriately? How do you vet your vendors to make sure that they're making the right commitments so that you're not putting yourself at risk? And then also just like, how do we get licenses? We do that as well.
Amazing. Well, I'd love to end this part one, part two episode with just a few kind of rapid fire questions. Maybe we could clip these and, just some quick wisdom from our CTO, Will, here.
Sure.
So question one, when you talk to other IT leaders, what AI questions or concerns come up the most?
Yeah, data security is huge. How do we manage the flow of information? How do we use these AI systems and all of the powerful things that they can do while also preventing them from hurting themselves and on us, essentially? And then how do we deploy it to users? And everybody's trying to figure out where are they most effective.
What's actually changed in the last 6 months that matters?
Sure. Yeah. Totally opinionated. Where this actually stands, I'm not sure. But using these agentic systems like Claude Code and Codex, we're internally using Codex right now. It is astonishing. Truly, like in the last 6 months. And I know that Claude Code has been out for, however long now, a year and a half or whatever. And Codex has had a version of itself for this period of time. But some of the most recent changes that they're doing have made these tools broadly better, like way better at handling tasks sort of all on their own. And it's a little hard to convey how impressive it's been, but truly these agentic systems have come an enormous way in 6 months, at least, for me.
we touched on this too, but if a business, or I guess an individual, for anybody listening who is doing nothing with AI today, where should they start?
So if they're starting from zero, they need to just go talk with ChatGPT, right? They need to, or Gemini or Claude or whatever. They need to just go experience it. And I don't want them to just use it like a chatbot. Like I wouldn't say just go like say hello, because it'll say hello back, right? And it's cool, but it's 4 years old that it could do that. Go ask it hard things. Like go look up the current sentiment for a Game of Thrones season, right? Like go ask it to go find information for them, or to help answer questions, and question it, and like criticize it and challenge it, and like try to pick out where these problems are. So that's layer one, is that if they have zero experience, just go chat with these systems and like upload documents and use the voice mode and take pictures and ask it to analyze it. Have it draw them a picture of a garden. Just play with it is really number one for people that have nothing. And the second part is for people that have experience with that, people who do use these systems, who have chatted with the AIs and they've sort of done this layer of things. The next thing I would encourage them to do is to work with an agentic system. See if they can find some AI platform that will plug in to a tool that they use day to day. Copilot is a wonderful example of this. And then do the same thing, but knowing that it can now do more, right? Like, so ChatGPT can't access your email, Copilot can. If you ask ChatGPT to go read your email for you, I mean, I know that there's a connector, but just for the sake of simplicity, if you use Copilot and ask it that, there's like a totally different mindset that you'll get into. And then for people that are doing all those things, they're super comfortable with it, go look at agentic systems. I am not going to recommend that they hook up an agentic system themselves if they're uncomfortable with it, but at least exploring that is really that third level for people that are, depending on where they're at.
You talked about the last 6 months, about what's been important. What are you most excited or concerned about for next year?
Those should be two separate questions. So I'm going to answer the first one, and then we'll split into the second one. So I am most excited about what it is that we're going to be able to do with some of these systems. There are challenges as a CTO that I have faced that I ignore answers entirely because they weren't possible. It was like, well, in order to do this, I'd have to go hire a team, right? It would be a huge project to go figure this out and to learn it and to do all these things. That barrier is lowering every day. And I'm very excited for what we can build. Like we're right now looking at building custom solutions for our clients to do things that I know no other company will do the same. And there's like a huge opportunity to provide a lot of value to us and our clients at very little cost to both to do it. So I'm very excited for that. In terms of risk with AI, I am very concerned for ourselves and our implementation of AI and the world that it is very easy to give these AI systems huge amounts of access to our systems and to our computers. And there's very little in the way of preventing them from making mistakes. And there's very little in the way of knowing when they make mistakes. And it's very hard to know why they make mistakes. And so this combination of easy to give these AI systems huge amounts of access and very few controls that are just in place to help control the problems that they can cause, I think will have many negative effects for a long time to come. And we're going to see those impacting us both on like the specific level, like if businesses don't manage it well. Like, I mean, I think Amazon's, their AI like deleted a huge web cluster at some point, and I think they accounted for it, but like, that's just an example of what can happen. But we're seeing people who deploy AI systems and they put something on the web, but because they didn't say, I want you to do this securely, hackers can just attack it. And hackers are using AI to be just as fast and just as effective as businesses are using it to deploy. And they're finding an enormous number of security vulnerabilities that are not handled well, tons of these systems that threat actors can abuse and use. And so there's there's a lot of, I think, very real risk to these systems that we will see. And it's not, I don't think it's well managed, and I don't know the answer to it. How do we do it broadly? But that is what makes me nervous, is a lot of the advancements that are happening so quickly that people are being encouraged to explore, and there's not really a good way to make sure that they do it safely, even when they're paying attention. So just putting like a huge emphasis on how do we do it right, and being aware of how the system is working to the best of your ability is going to be really important.
We got one more, and we got time for one more, so that's
Sure.
perfect. This is, if you could be concise with this, maybe a quick word of wisdom to maybe a teenager, a student, someone going to college, someone graduating, who are scared about a potentially disappearing job market or just uncertain future because of artificial intelligence.
Yeah. So I'll try to keep it short. My daughter is in high school. She shares these concerns, and they're very real, and I think they're very appropriate to be thinking about and to have on the top of your mind. I'll tell anybody who's willing to listen, including my daughter, that the best way to handle this right now is to, one, not ignore it. Don't avoid it. I don't think it's going away. Like, I just is impractical to me to assume that AI will stop to exist. It is probably going to be in your tool bag forever. Like, that's just the reality. And I would say that even before AI, there were many things that could discourage anybody from working in a particular field or in a particular career. And the way that you should navigate that is you should find what you're interested in, and you should just go do it. It doesn't matter if there's a new tool that comes out. There's always a new tool that comes out. There's always something that's going to change the career. You should just pursue it as best you can. Put yourself out in the open to be exposed to it. And if you do that versus somebody that is reserved and concerned and doesn't do it, you will have the head start. You will be ahead of the game. And where that leads you, I don't know, right? That's going to be dependent on whoever it is that's navigating it. But doing nothing is not the right answer. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think that's great advice. And thank you, Will, for this conversation. It's been amazing. It's been insightful.
Yeah, this was fun. Yeah, I look forward to our next one. And who knows, when we do this in a month or whatever, there's probably going to be new changes and new topics to discuss. So, really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Will.